Today is 13th of May, Sunday, 2012, Jack Fresco Seminar.
This discussion is about questions and answers. Sometimes a person asks a question in a field that they know very little about. In other words, if a person not familiar with electronics at all says, "What if the machine breaks down?" An electronics person doesn't know what he's talking about. Is it the transistor, the capacitor, the circuit, the welding? If you don't talk about specifics, you're not communicating. When a person says to me, "You can't predict the behavior of people," they're telling me that they don't know how to predict the behavior of people. And it's a subject that I can't do anything with. Unless they say, "What do you do about people that insist that they're right?" In other words, that's a specific question. A specific question is, how do you arrive at your decision? And why is your decision any better than any other decision? Now, the person that asks that question may or may not understand the answer. The assumption that people understand the answer that you give them is an assumption and projection. So, in order to check it out, if you have the time and you have a few people, you can say, "What do you think I mean by that?" And if they come off as something off, you know that they didn't get your intention. So, people that work on automobiles, say automobile engineers, not mechanics. Mechanics are a little different than engineers. Engineers understand the efficiency ratio of the parts, how much miles you get per gallon of fuel, and the technician understands the function of all the parts of the car. If you say automobiles are unsafe with conviction, that doesn't tell you how to make them safer. It doesn't tell you anything. Unless you say, if you make the brake drums an inch larger, the car will stop sooner. Something you can use. A non-answerable question is, how are you going to control the population? You can't control the population, it'll go right on multiply. The question is, how do you control the population? Not, you can't control the population, go right on multiplying. Does not give you alternatives. When a person says, "You can't make airplanes absolutely safe," well, what the hell does that tell you? Nothing, except that person's limited ability to participate. A man would say, "If you made airplanes safer," that doesn't tell you anything either. You can use. So you have to discredit that. If a person says governments have been corrupt ever since history began, that doesn't tell you how to make them uncorrupt. So you tell that person they have nothing to offer, unless you show a method of making a government work. Unless you say, "I would like to know what your view is on this." If a person comes up to me and says, "What is your view on automobile safety?" I said, "Do you know anything about automobiles? The mechanisms, the valves, what they're for?" No. Then you can't talk about the anatomy of the automobile. If you know nothing about the human body, you can't talk about anatomy. Say, people get sick and we don't always know why. Well, that's something that you can't do anything with. Now, if you say the soil is exhausted, the plants aren't growing, you've offered nothing. But if you take surplus food, grind it into small particles, mix it in with the soil, if the plants can assimilate that, it needs water, not just nutrients ground up in the soil. The water is the conveyor of the substance of the plants. But if you say, "We're running out of topsoil," what do you suggest? That's the next question to that person that says we're running out of topsoil. What do you suggest? "Well, I don't know." Then shut up. Do you understand how I mean that? Do you think? People can't ask questions unless they know the anatomy of the subject. It goes back to the same thing. When Richie used to say, "Daddy, what makes an airplane or what makes an automobile move?" Well, you say many different things. Fuel, combustion chambers, cylinders, wheels, transmission. What do you want to know specifically? Many things are involved in the movement of a car. But if you say, you can't predict human beings, they all come from different environments and they have many different reactions. You can't make them all react the same way. That doesn't tell you anything, except the person's limitations that they're talking about. Now, there are a lot of people that are permitted to talk today. In the future, they won't be. In other words, if you come into a medical conference and say, well, Dr. Jones, what do you think of this concept? Dr. Smith, what do you think of the concept? But if you're just an outsider, non-medical person, they don't say, what do you think of the concept? So at a medical conference, you have medical people. At an aeronautical conference, you have aeronautical people. So the kind of questions they ask are related to the flying machine only. Now, if it's a discussion of airport safety, then you have FHA people, airport designers, and you say, what's the matter with the runway? Well, whenever a heavy plane lands, the runway cracks. Or what's the standard recommendation of thickness and reinforcement in the runway? Why do you need rebars in the runway or a grid of wires? So if the concrete cracks, it doesn't change elevation. If you have wires in there, it keeps it at the same elevation even though it's cracked. If you're not equipped to understand the answer, you can't ask questions. If a guy says, you know, electronics can fail too, well, that's participation, but offering nothing. So sometimes I will not engage a person if I feel they're not talking about the subject. And they say, you can't predict human behavior. Different people may have different views. So, well, that's true. Give me the different view. Let's make our building 10 stories high instead of 4. Why do you want to do that? Just talk about the subject. If you say you can't make automobiles absolutely safe, what do you feel the limitations are? Well, the driver may be distracted. Then you want a system that affects the distraction of drivers. If they use a cell phone and they're driving and talking and the kids are fighting in the back, those are distractions. So you want a car that's not subject to distractions. How do you do that? I don't know. If you say, all you want soldiers to do is operate the machine gun. That's all you want them to do. You want to discuss philosophy on the trenches. They could discuss Mark Twain as against somebody else, but that would be irrelevant to the war. What they do is they blindfold a soldier, and he's to take a gun apart blindfolded. Do you ever see that? Then he has to assemble it blindfolded. That's what they need. In case you don't have light, you're in the trenches, and your machine gun jams, they want you to know how to undo the jam. But if you talk about philosophy and the history of guns, that does not undo the jam, unless you become very familiar with a particular kind of machine gun. Aeronautics conferences are on the characteristics of different airplanes. They try to photograph German airplanes during the war and try to show that they can't make a turn as fast as American planes can. Therefore, take advantage of that disadvantage of the German airplane. When the German pilot lands on an American airbase and surrenders the airplane, they take it up to study its turn characteristics and to write a report on what it can do and what it can't do. That gives you, American pilot, an advantage of knowing the rate of climb of that airplane. If you don't know that, then you're just going to rely on your own ability. So an expert is a guy that reports on the performance of the enemy airplane. But if a guy says, well, you can't predict that until you capture a plane. So he says you must capture a plane. So you offer a foreign pilot $50,000 if he flies in cash. You do whatever you have to do to get that information. But if you say you can't get a German airplane, that doesn't tell you anything. What are the methods of getting a German airplane? People come up with ideas. Will it work? I don't know. Then you put it to test. If it works, you use it. If it doesn't, you set it aside. So remember this. This is the thing you have to remember. People will talk about all kinds of things, but not when their car breaks down. They take it to an auto mechanic. When the air conditioning breaks down, they take it to an air conditioning mechanic. You can go to the baker. He can say, well, I don't know. Check the input and output. He doesn't know. So everybody likes to feel competent. Everybody likes to feel they want to participate. The question is, can they? The only way you can participate in anything is to offer a tangible, referential description. If you believe that all things are affected by other things, it means that human behavior is predictable. If you believe that conditioning shapes behavior. If you think it's inborn, you can't think about it. If you believe that human behavior is inborn, you can't predict. You say, who the hell knows what the inborn emotion is going to be? So if you can't predict it, you can't deal with it. But if you believe that people scratch their head because it itches, or they think it itches, that's all right, as long as you know why. But every action, if a person adjusts their glasses, it means ear pressure is bad, or the vision is not good, or if the glasses are too low, they move it up. You have to ask them why you move the glasses. You can take guesses, but that's not why they move their eyeglasses. If you believe that human behavior is based upon what Skinner is known for as reinforcement, he says people will do anything if you reinforce them in their terms. If you want a child to pick fruit for you, if they picked a basket of fruit and you said, that was very nice of you to do that, and you say, what would you like to do? He says, Daddy, I'd like to go on the merry-go-round. And you take him on the merry-go-round. Reinforcement. But what he does, you will perpetuate that behavior. If you spank them and give them negative reinforcement to certain behavior, they will stop that behavior only when you're around. Because when you're not there, they may beat up another kid, push him into the swimming pool if you're not there. So beating a person makes them behave a certain way only when you're around. When the teacher walks out of the classroom, there's a lot of noise and all that, but when the teacher comes back, everybody is silent again, because they're not rewarded for talking when a teacher is there. When a guy lands and says, I just shot down 2 or 3 German planes, the captain says, what method did you use? And he says, I want you to talk to the new pilots about the method you used. That would be information to the pilots. You gotta really know how to fly and outmaneuver the enemy. That doesn't tell you anything. Although it sounds sincere, you gotta outmaneuver the enemy. You gotta beat him to the punch. That sounds enthusiastic. Have faith in yourself. Have faith in your ability to fly. Confidence. Those words don't tell you how to stabilize the airplane. If you let go, the airplane is self-stabilizing. If you don't know those things, it's hard to communicate. And if a person says, you didn't answer my question, it would be, you didn't answer my question in terms I can understand it. Because you don't know they didn't answer. Like if you said, electronics breaks down sometimes. The guy in the field of electronics really doesn't get anything from that. But if you say the capacitor or the weld broke on the soldered copper wire going into the transistor, the guy knows where to look. But he doesn't know where to look when you say, it broke down. If you tell a doctor, it hurts, he knows something hurts. But if you say, my knee hurts, the top part of the knee, or the bottom part of the knee, he's got a little more to work from. But if you say, it hurts all over, what hurts all over? He can't do anything with that. So the only thing a doctor can do anything with is, do you have gas, do you have belching? And he's got a handbook. It says a lot of belching is eating foods that produce a lot of gases or emotional stress. He's got a handbook. So when you say, I belch continuously all day long, I can't stop belching, he might take out his handbook and look at that and compare it to what other doctors found. He can't do anything else except compare it. The average person does not compare mechanical systems, nor can they talk about the design of cities. If you say many people require different kinds of cities and different kinds of houses. Now, if they do, if everybody would like to drive their own car, individual car for everybody, they will cost $1 million apiece. If you make dies and stamp out 100 Chevys that look alike, they're much cheaper. Do you understand that? So most cars, most Fords, Volkswagens, whatever they are, look alike. You could make each one different, but it would be out of the range of cost. So, person says, do you allow for individuality in that society? Individuality to me means differences in values by different aspects of the culture. We can't afford all kinds of individuals. Then a guy wants to wear a suit with 3 creases in it. Well, that's individual. but it's unsane individuality. Unsane as individuality is when people say, I got a new dance, it's this. You don't need to get up. Well, that's an individual. But that dance doesn't do anything for people. Convincing them of that, do they want to know, what do you think of this type dancing? Well, I would say it's no different or no better, no worse than existing dancing. But I can't deal with that kind of problem. If I say dancing is a nothing thing, I mean, what does it contribute? It contributes to the well-being of people. They feel good dancing. Is that important? Well, what if they want to see a bullfight and they feel good watching a bullfight? Feel good is not the ultimate answer. It's the collective utility of the answer that I would go by. What will benefit people most? To know about basic things, how they work, how a flashlight works, how automobiles are interconnected, how we relate to the environment. If you say man is part of nature, say without food man cannot survive. That's what I mean by that. When I say he's part of nature. If oxygen is not in the air, he will die. So he thinks he's part of nature because he doesn't know that we depend on nitrogen. Lightning fixes the nitrogen in the soil. It makes it available to plants. Now, is that the purpose of lightning? No. Lightning occurs and the nitrogen becomes modified. But lightning is not there to modify the nitrogen. You can tell by nitrogen would be, electricity would flow only in the ground and modify the nitrogen only. It wouldn't go through the atmosphere and hit a tree and a little girl on a bicycle. Then it means it wasn't designed for a purpose. If you have ice weather, say the purpose of winter is to give us a change in season. We need change. Well, the people who live in the tropics never heard of winter time that are brought up there. And they wouldn't know what you're talking about. If they say, what is the winter for? You say, well, it's to give us a change in season. The average person, not being a meteorologist, meaning a student of weather, doesn't know what questions to ask. But there are a lot of kids that would love to participate. So they'll say, what if a person doesn't want to live in that city? They're looking for participation. If you say, the water supply is not even in all the houses. Can you make it even so that all people can get water when they want it? That's what they want to know. But you can't say, what if I don't want to live in that city? That's just bringing up an argument for the recognition of participation. So real participation is how would you acclimate people to this design if they were brought up to believe in individual housing? You can't do that unless you tell them where people get their values from. If you live in an igloo or a thatched hut or a wigwam, those become normal to you. And if you say, well, what if I don't want to live in a wigwam? It's a person bringing up contradictions for no other reason than participating. Do you understand that? What is real participation? When the brakes fail, what do? Gee, you crash. Well, can you make brakes that are less apt to fail? No, then shut up. That's what it means. So, your assumption that you've answered a person's question is an assumption, unless you ask them, what do you think I mean? And they come up with something entirely different, say, apparently I was unable to get that across. Or they don't have the background to understand what went wrong with the electronics. If you tell them the kidney and the spleen are not working properly, they say, oh, but they don't know anything. In order to know things, you have to get the book, Handbook of the Spleen, and Handbook on the Anatomy of Different Organs, how they work, what they do. Do the organs work, or are they controlled by emotions? Well, if you study emotions and the effect on organs, which is another subject altogether, the psychology of illness, it isn't always the failure of the kidney. It could be the failure of love of life in you. If your whole family is killed in an automobile accident, you may not want to live anymore. And they call that the will to die. And there are some people that can will death. I know it seems strange, but they go to bed at night and they don't feel alive, and they don't sleep well, they miss the other people, and their life has been cut, what they call their life. Now, if people live in a world where everybody's friendly, everybody's concerned about your well-being, when your closest friend dies, you're not left alone. How am I going to pay the rent? How am I going to eat? People live alone today. And I would say that if everybody tried to work to enhance the lives of everybody else, you wouldn't be desolate when somebody died in your family that was important to you. Does that make sense to you? Now, do you know what I mean by answering questions? You can't unless the person is in that discipline. If a person says, human nature keeps changing, that's why you can't predict what people will do. Say, he's telling you that he doesn't know of any method of predicting behavior. Now, you ever watch the Blue Angels fly? They have good communication. If they don't, one of them did the loop, the Blue Angels, too big a loop, too near the ground, and all the planes crashed. Are you familiar with that? Wow. That was the end of the Blue Angels. So if the pilot, the main guy, has erroneous judgment, and they all are trained to follow the pilot, then they all die. Now, if the pilot makes an erroneous decision, and you know it, and you fly out of that squadron, it worked out all right, you're kicked out of that squadron. Because that's the only way people have of knowing things is that the expert in the field knows more about it than you do. It's true that a refrigeration engineer might be able to make your refrigerator work well, but he knows more about it than the baker does. So when you call upon an expert, they're not always experts, but they're more of an expert than you are. And that's all we can go by. If the meteorologist tells me we expect a very stormy winter, he has more methods of arriving at that prediction than I do. Could he be wrong? Yes. But could I be wrong? Many times more than he would. Do you understand that? So we go by a guy that says the best place to catch fish is near a reef. How long have you been fishing? 65 years. How many fish have you caught? 4,000 tons. Well, you better listen to him than the guy next door that caught 2 or 3 fish. Could he be wrong? Yes, he could, but not as much as the average person. Is the city perfect? No. The word perfect has no meaning. It means there's every operation in that city for the benefit of all people in that city all the time. The answer is no. There's no such thing. And if you can recommend a method to make it more substantial, recommend that method. Do you understand that in communication then? There is no communication with people that are not schooled in that discipline. So what you have to do is teach them that discipline first, that their behavior is not their own, it's shaped by culture. If you can envision, do that first, and then go off in a different direction, you're better off. If they believe that every person is an individual and individuality is within the person, if you can't disprove that, get out of the conversation, because you can't take it anywhere. If you believe, yesterday, did you see those 2 dogs? They snap at you. The guy told me, he says, Fresco, don't touch the dogs, they snap. He gave me forewarning. But if you bring up those same dogs with kids that feed it fresh food that the dog likes, if every time a kid comes over, the dog is less apt to snap. I didn't say wouldn't snap, less apt to snap. If people are extensional to one another, not say, I love you, I need you, I want you, you mean more to me than anything in the world. If they don't behave in that way, they can't establish confidence in the other person. If a person has confidence in another person, you really can't do that unless you know more about the subject than the other person. If I have confidence in the pilot flying a plane, and I can't fly as well as him, I've flown with him a lot and he gets me there. That's all I have confidence in, the fact that he got me there. Is he a confident pilot? I don't know under what conditions he's confident and under other conditions he's not. I think I told some of you here about the Islamic people they were in an airplane and the pilot said he smelled smoke and he went back and they made a fire on the floor to heat up the tea. Obviously, they don't understand the significance of that, the people that did that. But they always understand that fire heats tea. For making a fire on the floor, they were unable to understand that. I'm sure they did make the fire because they knew that, but they wanted tea. I don't think they did. The journey to Mecca, on the way they made a fire in the airplane. They were heating in the seat. Are they dumb? No. They don't understand the relationship of fire to the inside of the airplane, especially at high altitude where they have air circulating and limited oxygen. If you open a window on an airplane, all the air would be sucked out. And some people say, well, I like a little ventilation. If the windows were openable, there'd be a lot of dead people and crashes. And you wouldn't know why, unless they noticed one window was unhinged in the broken parts. I don't know if you know this, when a plane crashes, the FHA takes it into a hangar and lays out the windows and the door and the landing gear, and they look at everything. And if there was an air pressure problem, the fuselage is blown out, the windows are blown out, and they know what to look for. FHA, are they perfect? No. But they know better what to look for than the average person. So when the FHA says they do a list of probable cause of the crash. Now if you say the man assassinated another person because he was brought up in Italy with a value system that differs from people who don't assassinate people that they disagree with. But if a person's conditioned to beat up on another guy that looks at his wife sexually, is he bad or is he a victim of culture? That's what I mean. So if you get mad at somebody, it means you really don't understand this subject. So if a guy says, you want to fight? He believes that if he beats you in a fight, he's right. He may be better at fighting than you are, but it doesn't make him right. A lot of normal people believe that the guy who's better at fighting is right. Right is might. You've heard that shit. And so, if you're right, you can get the shit kicked out of you. So if they say, why don't you explain your ideas to a lot of people, see how they feel about it. If you have an atheist lecture to a group of Catholics, they're going to vote him out. If you lose a debate, say you're on a debating team, you lose a debate, the guys like the guy that won the debate. Does it mean he was right? No. It just meant that the people that listening to him were familiar with that point of view more than the other point of view. So even if you win a debate, it doesn't mean you're right. If say God made all this, it can't come about any other way. Most people would shake their heads. That doesn't make them right. So when you get into the debate, you don't enter to win. You enter to see how many people you can primarily affect in the discussion. And if you're poo-pooed, you know what that means? They say, that guy is full of shit. And they all walk out. It means you would have no relevant approach to those people. Do you understand questions and answers? There are no answers. Answer is, can you answer this question? What makes war? Like, there's an answer. This is the answer. It's a whole study of kingdoms and habits of thought, and this nation is different than the other nation, and believes their way is the right way, so they try to kill the other nation. Are they bad? No. Are they murderers? No. They're victims of a different culture. So, if you can't get the people, instead of saying they're dumb, either you don't have the time to build a referential language, or they don't have the background to understand you. That's possible. I wanted you to get this bit so you don't waste your time. I don't talk to people that raise questions like, you can't predict human behavior. I can't do anything with that.
You mentioned you wanted to go over intellectual traps.
Intellectual trap is the habits you pick up. A habit is an intellectual trap. You revert back to that and say, somebody had to make all this. That's the intellectual trap. If you're trained in religion first, then the intellectual trap is assuming God made all this. And if you behave badly, I say the devil got into you. That's an intellectual trap. You had the free will to kick the devil out of you. There are people that look at a girl and want to have sex and say, get out of me, Satan. You know, they try to kick their own values out. That's an intellectual trap. It means if you're schooled as an Indian, you dance around a fire, that's an intellectual trap. A habit, established habit, is an intellectual trap.
Yeah, stating the problem is similar.
Very difficult.
Is the big problem, is a big deal.
It's almost impossible. Because if a guy bought a whole bunch of electronic equipment, sound equipment, everything, and he knows nothing about electronics, he says, my system isn't working. That's all he can say. But he can't say it's the transistors, capacitors, circuitry. He can't say that because he doesn't know that. But if he says it's not working, the expert is the guy that turns up the volume and it doesn't go up. He looks inside, he sees a burnt out transistor. He knows where to look. But the average person says, my car isn't working right. It tends to veer to the left or right. And the mechanic says, okay. Those words, even my car isn't working right, he says, what's wrong with it? Well, it veers to the right. He thinks in terms of tire pressure. The words the average person uses triggers that, but it doesn't happen in the average person. Unless they've been to a mechanic 4 times, and the mechanic stated that, they say it might be the air pressure in my tires. So he checks the air pressure. Only after he knows. But a person can't know it's the air pressure. A person can't know it's the humidity in the air that carries the allergens that you're allergic to, unless they know about transfer of allergens. So you think you can talk to people. That's why it's good to ask a person, what are you majoring in? Guy says, electronics. Then what else are you interested in? He says, human behavior. How much human behavior have you worked with? Well, I like Charles Gordon's concepts of behavior, or I like the Gestalt concept. Then you know what areas of behavior they're indoctrinated in or habituated in. Can a guy be a mechanist and habituated? I would say no, because a mechanist listens to what people says, but then puts it to test to see if it works. And if it works, they're not victims of habituation. Now let me give you an example of stating the problem. Only in mechanics is that obvious. When a person says, my refrigerator doesn't work, well, they don't know whether it doesn't get as cool as it should, has it turned off, they don't know. The expert is the guy that knows the anatomy of the refrigerator. You can talk to him. But you can't talk to a person that knows nothing about refrigerator. A person that knows nothing about, say, airplanes can't say what makes it stable. He doesn't know when you said the dihedral makes it stable. He doesn't know what that means. How much dihedral? How do you determine that? In aeronautics, you're given the method of determining that. In automotive science, you say, can this automobile climb hills? The average person says that. Says yes. Can it climb a hill 45 degrees? No, that's too much. Your car can't handle that. Can a war tank handle that? No. So if you have a table in your war tank, it says do not try to climb hills in excess of 45 degrees. That's how to use a mechanism. Don't try to do upside down flying in a non-stunt plane. A stunt plane shuts the fuel off when it's upside down, otherwise it'll spill all over the plane. So a stunt plane has a bypass mechanism that shuts the fuel when you turn upside down. But if you say the plane is equipped for stunting, that means those people took care of it. So when you talk about a given subject, architecture, structural, bridges, the way the structure's arranged, you can talk to people. But if they say, what makes a bridge stand up? You say, have you got 3 days? The person says, no, I haven't. Then come back when you have more time. Because there's many little things you can discuss. But things are not subject to questions and answers. In school, they say there's a question and answer period. We even talk about it. But you really can't have questions and answers. You can have, are you informed technically? The person says, no. Then tell them what technology is and how technicians arrive at decisions. Do they know how to arrive at decisions outside their field? Maybe not. You have to find that out. An electronics expert doesn't know how to check behavior. He says, most people I met are selfish, therefore it's natural. He makes the wrong assumptions. Even though he knows electronics from A to Z, he can't transfer that to another field. So questions and answers are really, in the future, it will not be that, what is your background? And a person tells you, then you talk to them in terms of their background. There are no such thing as questions and answers. Well, even though I use that term, any questions, anything you don't understand, but if it's no question, just a bunch of statements, that is feeling always permitted to participate. That girl had a lot of participation in her life, but no communication. She only tells people of their limitations when she talks. Do you understand what that means? There's no such thing as questions and answers. You can't answer questions. You can teach them about electronics, or you can teach them about the characteristics of technology, how one part affects another. There's a code, usually, in automobiles that tells you what to do. Without that code, the average person drives a car until it breaks down. This is what they do. They drive until it cuts out, because they can't afford to take it in every time there's slight differences. They don't always have the money. So the word democracy cannot be manifest. If you can't afford to take your car in, or your wife to the doctor when she has chronic headaches, and take her in for an MRI, which is over $1,000, say, well, look, why don't you eat a little less and don't stuff your gut so much? You try roundabout systems if you're poor. So the word democracy does not permit you to behave democratically, unless you have the purchasing power to do so. So I'm not interested in words like freedom, democracy, individuality, because they're not telling me anything. Something about the person's limitations is all they tell me. One person says, I believe in individuality. I don't have to make a painting that makes sense to you as long as it makes sense to me. That's not sharing ideas then. If you make a painting that means a lot to you, you love the flashes of green and yellow crossing it, that's venture. It shows strength. All that's projection. I can't deal with that. I say, well, go and paint if you enjoy it, if it makes you feel good. But don't come at me and say, will you frame my paintings in your exhibition hall? If the painting you do gives everybody a different value system, I can't see the benefit of it. If you tell them that the word water means anything, then there's a loss in communication, if it means subject to interpretation. If water means something you drink, contaminated, uncontaminated water, salt water, acidity in the water, that means something. But if you just talk about water in one way, and everybody interprets it their own way, you'll have a divided civilization. Why do we have to have one way? We don't have to have one way. We have to have a verifiable way, not any one way. One way is God made everything. A verifiable way is plants won't grow if you don't water them, or keep the soil, or keep certain insects from attacking the leaves. That's a verifiable way. So language has to do with verifiability. That's why you can't communicate with everybody. You can only communicate with those people that are relevant to the subject you're trying to communicate. If your mother says, a person is guilty, I know it, I can see it in his face. Well, nobody is ever guilty of anything. They just have different methods than you have. That's very hard to accept if a person is a disturber of the presence. If I had a person that was a continuous disturber, I might say you have to leave the session because I have to consider everybody there. A disturber in the sense is, I don't agree with anything you said. I believe I have free will no matter what you say. I say you'll have to leave. He says, you're avoiding my question. No, I'm not. I have to consider, or I will consider the majority of people. I'll let a person talk if they're sincere, but if they're using it as a gimmick, what if I don't agree with you? That's bringing up opposition. If they say, I don't agree that your building will be stronger if you run your bracing geodetically. And then I say, well, show me where it doesn't work. But if they say, I don't agree with you, they want to participate. So participation means fundamental referential criticism. People don't talk about the subject, they talk about their feelings regarding the subject. Do you know the difference? I don't know that I want to live in a round city. What if I want to live in a square city? Well, they say, what are the benefits and how do you arrive at that? That would be inquiry. When you ask questions, you have to say, tell what a question is. Does it have a referent? If it doesn't, the question could mean anything. So, participatory democracy is a ridiculous statement. It cannot be. You can't participate in democracy unless you define that term. What do you mean by that? And do you agree with participatory democracy? The guy says, yes, I do. Well, why do you take your car to an auto mechanic? Why don't you take it to a butcher? let him try to fix your car, or the chicken raiser, or somebody. They always take it to the right person because the wrong person can't participate. Now, when they talk of participatory democracy, I said, how would you grow more food? I want them to participate. They don't know. So study agriculture, then come back to the Venus Project and work, or try something, work at it. I don't see anything detrimental in that. But if you can do that when you talk to people, you tell them that you're not asking a question. I am too. They don't even know that. So you say, well, first you have to read a book on semantics and become familiar that language is subject to interpretation, because if it is, then I fear that you don't understand it as I want you to. So you have to give them the basis that enables you to make more appropriate decisions.
I'll post the questions to Jack and Roxanne right now.
Okay, thanks, Sean. First question, do you have a transitional solution for technological unemployment before a resource-based economy can be attained? Have you considered the importance of getting governments on board with such a transitional idea? For example, decreasing working hours. Do you have a plan for transitional government?
No, we only have a plan for transitional resource-based economy.
Not within this system.
No, not within the system.
Jack Catron stated that you grew up with around 4 or 5 other intellectuals as a young man. What happened to these other men? Did you ever become socially aware or help? Did they ever become socially aware or help you toward the resource-based economy direction?
To whatever extent they can. They are now deceased.
Yeah. Well, Jack did several books
Yes.
trying to introduce what he could.
Yes.
Jack Catron. You surrounded yourself with some interesting individuals like Catron. Why did they stop being part of the socio-cyberneering and the resource-based economy idea?
They never stopped. They worked at it all their lives.
Yeah, Jack Catron did. The people that Jack really spent a lot of time with when he was younger are kids that he really introduced to science and aviation too. They all went into aviation, most, didn't they? And they worked with you in building the Trend home, didn't they?
Yes.
The first aluminum prefabricated home after World War II.
Yes.
And weren't they going to go to, at one time you asked them all to meet you at Tuamotu, isn't that how that?
South Pacific Island.
Yeah, you thought a war was going to happen, and as I remembered, you asked them to all meet you there, because after the war you wanted to start a new direction society, but you were the only one that showed up there, was that right?
Yes. Yes, that's true. They just were not able to carry that out. They didn't have the money to travel out there.
I see. In the collapse, do you think the government will use the army in the streets to keep their power, or do you think the army will protect the public?
No, the army will protect the government, because that's the way they're brought up. The army is to serve the interests of the establishment, not the majority of people. As witness the police spraying mace or some other object into people's eyes when they were not fighting back. The police serve the interests of the establishment, not the public.
In the past, I read in an old newspaper advertisement on your website that you identified yourself as a behavioralist when attending public lecture back in the 1960s and 1970s. Would you still identify yourself as a behavioralist today?
A behaviorist, I would say it's greatly modified today. Yes, I believe environment shapes behavior, but I'm interested in the specific aspects of the environment that shape particular kinds of behavior. Whether it be serial killers, gangsters, whatever people are, they're shaped by their subculture, the culture they're exposed to, and the conditions they're exposed to.
How useful is evolutionary psychology? Do you think there's such a thing as evolved behaviors? particularly in nonverbal animals?
I would say that that's a very difficult subject to answer. I can only say that animals behave with their limited receptors to whatever extent their receptors tell them. Their receptors are not sophisticated, and that's why they're called primitive. Human being is capable of a wide range of receptors or instruments to improve their ability to function, such as microscopes, which extend their sensitivity into realms that they themselves cannot perceive visually. They can use instruments, and the instruments serve extensional devices. But human beings without instruments would be very primitive indeed.
Also, in terms of evolved behaviors, animals really react to their environment. Whatever receptors they have, if it doesn't work well within their environment, whether you call them evolved or whatever changed mechanisms or apparatus that they have, if it doesn't work well in the environment, they die out. So evolved is kind of a strange word,
Yes.
Evolved behaviors. You have often said that in the future, the field of psychology will be replaced with behavioral science.
That means a study of the effects of environment upon behavior, to find the mechanisms that are the primary mechanisms responsible for certain types of behavior. If you're brought up in a society where people have 10 or 15 wives, that would be normal to your upbringing. If you're brought up in a society where a person has one wife, or if you're brought up in a society where religion dominates, that will affect the value system of that society. So I'm a great believer in the effects of environment on human behavior. I don't think there's a Republican gene or a Democratic gene. I think all that the genes deliver is the color of the eyes, the shape of the head, and a certain propensity, reflexes. Yes, all that's controlled by genes, but values are learned.
The rest of this question is, isn't this very similar to behaviorism, because behaviorism identifies the conditions which generate behavior?
If it does that, then I'm all for it.
Is it true that psychologists referred their patients, subjects, to you to work on?
Not all psychologists, some psychologists.
Also, when lawyers started coming to some of Jacques' lectures in the 1960s or 70s, wasn't it? Then they brought judges, and then the judges, like there was one judge who worked with juveniles, and instead of sending them to juvenile home, they would send them either to juvenile home or to Jacques' lectures. Is
Yes,
that right?
that's true.
It says in the book I've read, a New York Times reporter attended your lectures in the 70s. He then went on to commit suicide. Is that because he could not handle this information, became depressed, etc.? Do you know who he's talking about?
Yes.
Oh.
Some newspaper reporter came to a couple of my seminars, and he said, what you say makes sense. If I can't get that out, I'll kill myself. I believe I can get it out. I believe that what you say makes so much sense that people can be turned around. Well, he was turned around, but he was unable to turn people around. And he killed himself because he really believed that I had the answers to questions and that all he had to do was write about it and people would understand it. It's not that simple.
I imagine there are other reasons why he did that. I couldn't imagine
Oh,
that
he
would
was
be the
not well enough
only
equipped
reason.
to handle that problem.
Yeah. Have you ever read B.F. Skinner's novel called Walden 2? And if so, what are your thoughts on it?
It was insufficient because the methods of building cities, the methods of dealing with problems were not sufficient or sophisticated enough.
There was another book called that Jack Catron
wrote.
Yeah, Jack Catron was one of the guys that
What
Jacques
about the book?
trained when he was younger, and it tried to talk about a resource-based economy. But he wrote the book Walden 3, which was kind of chaotic, but had a lot of references to Jacques' work, and the main character was taken after Jacques and talked about a city in the future. I have heard that you produced some books or publications for socio-cyberneering members back in the 70s. Would it be possible for you to make these freely available online for us to read, please?
I would say that the book, The Best That Money Can't Buy, is an updated version of those books.
Yes, it took some of that information and included it in there and
Yes.
added more. Is there any more news on when there may be new lecture audio materials from the 70s available at your online store? We've been waiting a little while for this. Thanks. Actually, we just got 40 tapes from Carl Geisler, who used to go to the lectures. You'll hear him with the German accent. He found 40 more tapes, so for the last several weeks we've been pulling them in. Today we're just pulling in changing the tapes. There are several of them that broke, and we're
On the internet.
yeah, no, we're not putting them there. So we're working on those now. We're putting them in new cases and pulling them into the computer. So we pulled in about 40 hours. So first, that's the first step. We have to pull it all into the computer, but we are working on it. I can't say when exactly we'll have it, but maybe we'll make them into MP3s or something more accessible. I'm not sure. Have you ever been tempted to change the system from within?
No, I never have been tempted to change the system from within. I attempt to inform people as to the effects, the prime effectors in our society, and the harmful effects of the free enterprise system.
I don't think there's a step within this system to bring it without problems into a resource-based economy. There's no openings for that within this system.
It requires a different value system, a different approach.
This system will forever uphold this system until it just crashes.
Until it can no longer work.
And the examples of that are all over, you know, with polluting the air.
All over the world, not just America.
Please explain why socialism is not a good transitional tool.
I never said it was not a good transition tool. It's not the best. It's not updated. Socialism was great when it was designed, but today we have much better systems, much more effective, to enhance the lives of people in a much faster way than the old-time socialism. Socialism was concerned with the working class. We're concerned with knowledge, and we're concerned with surpassing the need for work. In other words, we think machines could replace jobs that are monotonous and boring or dangerous, that people think in terms of work to earn a living. In the future, you don't need to think in terms of work. You will be provided for. And you can study anything you want to study in school. So I would say that most jobs will be phased out. Most of the early professions will be phased out.
Yeah, I have my finger up the hook. He said most of the early professions would be phased out. Okay, Jacques, why didn't you take the opportunity to make money and then change the world with that money?
Because then they would say, well, that guy is a son of a bitch. He became a millionaire, and then now he talks against the system. I don't trust him.
Actually, Jacques did work within the system a lot when he was younger, had many different inventions and ideas, and just because you have good ideas that are better than what's out there does not mean it will take on and make a lot of money with them. There's a lot of tremendous inventors that didn't get anywhere in this system for various reasons. But whatever money Jacques did make, we always turned it back into making more products and making the research center and perpetuating these ideas and introducing them to others. Why could you not turn your own brother to these ideas? Why did he go into acting instead?
Because I wasn't skilled enough to reach him. In those days, you know, we're talking about 40, 50, 60 years ago, I was not able to reach him. I really tried. I really tried. I could not reach him at the time. I was not as skilled.
You were the younger brother, too.
Yes.
How much older was he from you? Do you remember?
About 6 years older.
Mm-hmm. What's the relation between Jacques and Roxanne? We've been living together and working together since 1976.
Yes.
That's a relation.
We relate fairly well in most areas. And I would say if that continues, which it will, and I'm glad that Roxanne has been an enormous help. Without Roxanne, I don't think we could have gotten our books published or most of our films made. She's very good at film production, and she's very good at translating.
We pretty much worked on just about everything together. And mostly it was a learning process for me, learning how to make models. Jacques taught me how to do technical illustration, which transferred to fine arts, taught me how to do model making, and I learned on his designs, which was really fascinating. Then I helped make a living with that to help support this project. And then I worked on them with everything else that I could help with. When people ask if we're married, I say we're as good as or better than married. Okay, Jacques, looking backward in time, if you could change certain paths you made in life, what are some of the things that you would have done differently?
I can't answer that. I don't know.
Is there anything you regret or?
No, nothing. Everything I've learned from all my experiences, I've learned something useful.
Jacques, in your lectures, you questioned the role of emotions in machines. Emotions may be used in machines as a mutator, what that is, for their algorithm to perceive more variance in their evolving intelligence.
I would say emotions are the feelings you have about things. It's what you do about it that counts. If you feel that war is terrible, and if you do nothing to try to put an end to it, I would say it's useless. We don't put emotions in machines because we don't know how. No machines have ambition. No machines feel good. They just produce a lot of goods and services, and they have no feelings, nor are they concerned whether they produce cannons, submarines, bombers, or respiratory systems. The machine has no feelings, and the machines cannot have feelings. They don't even know how to put feelings in the machines, although you can make a machine that will verbalize as though it had feelings. It would be like a movie actor acting the part, but they really don't feel.
We don't really want machines to have emotions. We want them to take on an action pattern. We don't want people sitting there and emoting and being emotional without doing something about it.
Right.
Jacques, have you ever read Jack Catron's book, Is There Intelligent Life on Earth?
Yes, I have. I think it's sort of a roundabout way of talking about things. I would be more direct than Catron was.
Catron always kept up. He spoke with Jacques quite regularly.
Yes.
And always sent Jacques his new books and things. How do you increase interest toward life, towards some activity, towards learning and researching?
Well, you have to understand the person you're working with. Then you have to design the system so it fits their background. You have to design the approach to that person based on their background.
This person might be talking about himself or herself. I don't know if it's within oneself. What age do you hope to live to?
I don't think about that. I just go on working. I may die tomorrow or I may live on, I don't know. But I don't concern myself with that.
This question, how do you justify the fancy sprinkler in the water? I think this person might be talking about the It's the only place I can think of a fancy sprinkler. One of the house computer rendering drawings, there's a jet of water in the front of the house.
Oh, that would be a filter system. Some filtering. There's no fountains unless they are water filters. There are no fountains for just luxury or to amuse people. Everything in the future will have a function. So if you see a water fountain, it's part of a water treatment plant.
And that does help the fish in there too, to
Yes.
aerate the water.
Yes.
Have you ever turned around a fundamentalist Christian Baptist, and how?
Well, first of all, I approached him with the Bible. By approaching him with the Bible, it says in the Bible, at least the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not kill. You shall not judge other people, otherwise you will be judged. And I point out all the statements of the Ten Commandments and how far we've come from it. When we get mad at another country, we bomb the hell out of them. And we kill them. We all join that. And the churches bless the armies, and they bless the war tanks. Particularly the Catholic Church sprinkles holy water on the war tanks. And the Catholics in Italy bless the war tanks fighting Americans, and the Catholics in America bless the war tanks in America. I would say that the church seems to conform to social institutions. If they did not conform, they would be poorly attended. And the church that does not conform is not advocated as a method of social deliverance.
And what methods do you use to turn around the fundamentalists?
The Bible itself showed them that it's almost impossible to live according to the teachings of Christ. Monetary system.
Okay, you said in a monetary system. I have my finger off it for a minute. In the Fat Man on the Left book, it said you loved bran muffins. We actually never read the Fat Man on the Left book.
No.
Yeah, Nate is a tremendous researcher who did Jacques' wiki page, and he found that. But anyway, it said you loved bran muffins. This is true.
I happen to like apple pie and bran muffins, but that has nothing to do with anything.
Yeah, they said, can we have the bran muffin recipe? We don't have one. Do you think the government and banks will forgive debts?
No, never. They can't operate unless they create debt.
What's Jacques' primordial slime? You know how you always talk about the people come and bring primordial slime with them.
Well, I said when the animals crawl down to the primordial slime, they drag some of the slime with them, meaning their background and experience.
Okay, this person was asking, what's your primordial slime?
Poverty, hunger, scarcity, all that was the prime motivators for social change. Human suffering, war, poverty, hunger.
That's good. Okay, I guess that's it for now.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to express these values.
Yeah, we appreciate your questions. Some are really good. And I guess next week, if all goes well, we will talk to you then. Thanks, everyone.
Yes. Appreciate all the work that you're all doing out there.
Yes, thanks again on my end for everything everybody else is doing. It's tremendous help. Okay, thanks again, everyone.
Okay, so that's the end of the seminar, Sunday, 13th of May, 2012.